As Talia was up in the tree, she calls out to Knox asking if he was alright. Her face was filled with concern about him as she continues to ask if he was hurt anywhere. Knox looks up at her thinking that she had helped save him just now. But something alerts him. He swings his blade to attack and defend himself from the attacks of 2 gray wolves. Knox began to breathe heavily after killing another gray wolf. He turns back to face Talia, telling her that he was alright while thinking that this wasn't the time to be so carefree. Talia continues to be concerned for Knox and tells him that she was glad he wasn't hurt. Knox prepares himself for another attack thinking that he had probably shown her a pathetic side. But something below him catches his attention. He looks at his hands which were trembling and realized that the recoil from his skill was already here. But more gray wolves slowly start to approach him as he knew that it wasn't over yet. The elite gray wolf was finally facing Knox with its eyes shining bright like a diamond. Knox smiles at that fact and thinks that it was finally getting up. The elite gray wolf begins to walk around Knox with its gaze still focused on him. It circled around Knox like a vulture while meeting his gaze. It lets out a low growl and speeds out from its spot towards Knox. Knox sees this and braces himself for a fight. But something else had happened. The elite gray wolf had dashed past Knox instead. Knox was confused AF about the actions of the elite gray wolf. He begins to think about the actions of the elite gray wolf and began to realize something. He hears rustling from behind him and turns, but was too slow. The elite gray wolf had sliced Knox's left arm with its claw. Blood was seen dripping from its claws after the attack. Talia sees this and calls out to Knox in concern. The elite gray wolf soon begins to run in a different direction. Knox could only stand still and held onto his injured shoulder. He curses at the thought that this was only supposed to be 2.5 stars. He believed that the rating needs to be revised, as this elite gray wolf was smarter and more cunning than in the game. Knox steadies himself with his sword thinking that the attack just now took him by surprise. He looks around for the elite gray wolf thinking that he should have realized when it was controlling the other wolves earlier, and that it had used the terrain and geographical advantages too. A sudden noise appears from the bushes catching Knox's attention as he turns to face it. He stares in that direction and needed to first get his guard up. When the elite gray wolf was near him, Knox swung his sword towards it thinking that it had landed. But the elite gray wolf had stopped inches from Knox, causing him to miss his attack. Knox was surprised to see this, as the elite gray wolf snickers and smiles at Knox. It opens its mouth which revealed its sharp fangs and lunges toward Knox. Knox realized that it was waiting for him to do a huge swing and had shown an opening. Knox grunts hard and tries his best to swing his sword once again shouting out. But he soon realizes that the recoil had fully arrived. The elite gray wolf was now inches from his face with its mouth wide open ready to take a bite out of Knox. Knox sees this and wondered about how he couldn't predict this and if it was because he had gotten too excited due to having cleared the game many times before. His face was filled with dread as he thought that he could have done it all, but that was a foolish judgment. He closes his eyes in preparation for the elite gray wolf's painful bite. But a rough sound was heard causing Knox to open to see what had happened. A dagger had been shoved into the elite gray wolf's eye. Knox thought if it is able to create an opening, we can also create one, and the person who created that unexpected variable wasn't Knox, as it was revealed that Talia had thrown the dagger to save Knox's life once again. Holding onto his sword for dear life, Knox lets out a battle cry, pushing the sword straight into the elite gray wolf's body with all his remaining strength. It yells out in pain from the 2 attacks from Talia and Knox, and finally collapses onto the ground with the dagger still in its eye. Knox was breathing heavily and kneeled on the ground after being exhausted from the battle. Talia continues to call out to Knox, but something catches her attention. She sees that there were still 2 gray wolves around looking at the scene. But they soon turn around and run away. Talia then leaps down from the tree and rushes in front of Knox with the torch in her hand asking if he was alright. Knox wipes the blood off his face and started to thank Talia but stopped himself halfway. Talia was confused, but Knox wondered why he was going to thank the enemy who was going to kill him in the future. Instead of thanking Talia, Knox told her that there was no need to worry. But upon seeing the clawed injury on Knox, tears began to flow in Talia's eyes as she yells at him about being injured just now and if he was really okay. Knox takes back the torch from her while telling her that it was just a slight wound, but Talia continues to ask, but Knox cuts her off saying that it was fine. Hearing this made Talia glad as she tells him that she was glad he wasn't injured elsewhere. Just then a spider drops down from the heavens. Talia notices that something was crawling on her shoulder. She sees the spider as it was reflected in her eyes. Her scream was loud to the point that Knox was alerted to it. He turns to see what it was, wondering if it was another monster. Talia rushes toward Knox with fear on her face and grabs him. Knox called out to her as she held onto him tightly. Talia mutters the word spider to Knox as she held onto him tightly with her teary eyes. But her eyes soon reflected the image of the spider that she soon spots on her shoulder. Seeing the spider caused Talia to grab onto Knox even harder as she screams out loud. Knox was stunned by her reaction as he wonders how long she was intending to hang onto him. He then looks at her with curious eyes, wondering if she was really afraid of the spider on her shoulder. Knox decides to wipe the spider off of Talia's shoulder with his hand. He then asks her why she was following him into the forest even though something like a spider was going to scare her. But Talia was still shocked by the presence of the spider as she continues to tell him about the spider and wondered if he too was also afraid of it. Knox teases her by saying that she definitely won't become a knight. Hearing that reply made Talia flustered as she shouts at Knox, but he was glad that she had finally let go of him. But Knox continues to cough blood due to the intense fight he had with the wolves. Talia asks him if he was okay with a concerned look on her face. As the coughing stopped, Knox informs her to not worry about him as he thought of the recoil. He then looks at her and thinks that she had finally pulled her own weight. Knox smiles at the thought that Talia had managed to save him. He wanted to thank her before, but her screaming made it impossible, so Knox decides to just thank her in his head while Talia continued to look at him with concern. The sun finally rises and lights the forest up as Knox stares at it. A ring is seen near the corpse of the wolf that Knox had just killed with a dark aura emitting from it. Knox and Talia now need to get out of the forest. Crying noises could still be heard at the estate. Emma was seen still kneeling on the ground while crying. She says out loud that she was the one that had killed the young Miss Talia. Rodwell stood near Emma as he wondered if Talia and Knox did not make it. He looks up with a worried expression on his face as he thinks that the disappearance of Miss Talia will create a problem between both families, and since a lot of children in this area would go missing in the missing child's forest. He continues to be worried as he thought of how the people who secretly say that the Reinharber family was incompetent. But another servant shouts out to Rodwell, telling him to look over there. They could see that the fog of the forest was being lifted. The sight of the fog being cleared meant that the missing child's forest has been cleared. This sight stuns everyone at the estate as Emma and Rodwell stared at it in awe. Emma immediately stands up to ask Rodwell about the meaning behind the fog being lifted in the forest and if it meant what she thought. Rodwell agrees with Emma that her thoughts were right. He explains to her that the event of the fog being cleared meant that the missing child forest had been cleared, and that the only possibility that they were all thinking about had turned into reality. Emma became teary-eyed once Rodwell explained to her what was happening. Knox and Talia had now appeared at the entrance of the missing child's forest. The servants shouted out that young Master Knox was coming out. The servants were baffled to learn that young Master Knox had actually managed to clear the forest, which was hard to believe, and it looked like he was coming out of it as if it was nothing. Rodwell tries his best to hide his smile while knowing that he was certain now. With the clearing of the missing child forest, Rodwell knew that the hierarchy of the descendants within the Reinharber family was about to experience great turmoil. Knox had finally returned and asked why everyone was gathered around the entrance of the missing child forest. Emma shouts out to young Miss Talia and rushes towards her. She immediately hugs Talia and tells her that everyone was extremely worried about her. Rodwell informs Knox that the people from the family were worried about his disappearance too. Knox was surprised to learn that his family was worried about him as he couldn't believe that they would worry over a good-for-nothing like him. The reputation of his family as a dark family was about to go down. Talia tells Emma to stop crying as she continued to wipe her tears away. Emma then grabs tightly onto Talia's shoulder. With a slightly angry voice, She tells Talia that she was going to tell her all about the 71 rules of the Stillrainer family again and asked Talia to follow her. Talia grew nervous and soon tells Emma that she was sorry. But Emma didn't let go of Talia, informing her that she wouldn't dare to blame her as she ensures Talia that the patriarch would be teaching her the rules personally. Knox looks at Emma and notes that she looked like Rona, who has extraordinary stamina at level 4.5. Emma then thanks Knox for protecting their young miss while being in the forest. Still having a sad expression on her face, Knox tells Talia that even though he didn't have the intention of going in with her, she managed to pull her own weight, so she shouldn't beat herself up too much. Talia's face lit up like a Christmas tree upon hearing those words from Knox. Back at the family estate, Knox places down his sword and bag onto a chair. He starts to undress while being glad that his adventure in the missing child's forest was over. He touches his head with an exhausted look on his face, thinking about how Rodwell was waiting outside the forest with knights, which was totally unexpected. He wonders if Rodwell did that because of Talia. But he brushes off that thought as a smile creeps on his face as he looks at his pocket. He had gotten the item that he wanted from the missing child's forest. He pulls out the hidden piece onto the palm of his hand, and a window appears telling Knox that he had obtained a new artifact. Another window appears informing him that he has obtained an accessory called the Black Flame Ring. Window information about the Black Flame Ring pops up. Its name was the Black Flame Ring, its category was accessory, its grade was low intermediate, its attribute was darkness, its stats were +1 stamina and +1 mana, and its requirement was that it could only be equipped by those who were able to use dark mana. The Black Flame Ring also had a special effect. When a user defeats a target while equipping it, the user will be able to steal a very small amount of their life force and turn it into theirs. The higher the rank of the target defeated, the more life force the player will steal. Knox smiles as he looks to the right. He knew that it was the only artifact that can steal someone else's life force. But his expression changes as he knew that just having the ring doesn't guarantee that Knox will live a long life. Knox knew that one's life cannot be extended infinitely, and considering that only a small amount of life force can be stolen, it won't be easy to overcome the terminal illness. As long as Knox can struggle, he could progress. Knox decides to place the ring on his finger, prompting a window to appear telling him that he has equipped the Black Flame Ring. He smiles knowing that being able to struggle was way better than a life that was hopelessly on the verge of death. After equipping the Black Flame Ring, Knox could feel that his life force and mana were increasing. He soon shouts out calling Rona's name. He tells her that he knew that she had been lingering outside of the room for a while. The door to the room soon opens. Rona peeks her head out of the door, nervously asking Knox if he had the ability to see through things. Knox tells her that he might be able to, which causes Rona to blush heavily as she covered her eyes with her hands, asking Knox if it also meant that he could see her naked body as well. Knox hits her on the head in anger upon hearing those words from her, yelling at her about what she was talking about. Rona stumbles away from Knox after being hit and tells him that it hurts. As she rubbed the spot on her head that got hit, she asks Knox why his finger flick felt like it hurts even more now. Knox places his arm on the table, telling Rona that they should arm wrestle, which confuses her for a moment. Rona places her arm on the table as well with a confident look on her face as she tells Knox that if she wins, he will increase her salary. Knox agrees but warns her about losing as she knew that he would deduct 20% of her salary. They soon hold each other's hand and began the countdown for the match. Knox looks in anticipation as the countdown reaches 2. Upon hearing the number 3 being called out, he immediately slams Rona's arm onto the table with ease, which surprises her. Rona's face was filled with dread and shock as she wonders what had just happened and that something was strange. She immediately calls out to Knox, telling him that it was unbefitting of a reputable family's son to reduce the salary of a servant's poor pittance by 20%. Knox waves his hand in the air and tells her that what she said was true. But he reminds her that he was the rumored good-for-nothing of the Reinharber family, which was a rumor that she had spread. With a happy smile on his face, Knox tells her that he did not care for trivial things such as honor. Rona immediately bows on the floor to apologize to Knox. But a sudden feeling overcame Knox that jolts him up. Multiple windows appear informing him that the effects of the trait frequent sickness have been activated. Knox has obtained wrist fracture level 2 and obtained a level 1 flu. Knox was annoyed to be afflicted with such troublesome status afflictions. He then informs Rona that he would cancel the reduction of her salary if she brings him some ice and a wet towel. Rona looks at him with a worried expression as she could see that he wasn't looking too well. Knox had a painful expression on his face as he thought about being satisfied with getting the ring for now and that he needed to get some rest. But a memory started to appear from before his reincarnation. His past self was dying as he thought about how sure he was with the name, Yoo Chan. Thanks for watching the latest part from the Voice of Manhwa. Subscribe for more content and don't forget to comment below what you want to see in the future. Like and share for more.